Tickets, please. Tickets, please. Psych, no tickets required. It's free entry to your magical tour bus ride through Soundtown. I am your guide, Russ, and my trusty co-guide host. Please introduce yourself.
My name's Eric.
And again, welcome to Soundtown, the podcast where we interview our friends in the music community. Yay! You've made it!
Russ, are we both recording these intros in different places than usual?
We are, and mine is an accident. I'm planning to go back to my original place. I'm in my home office. And for those just listening, you can't enjoy the scenes in my background here. Here's a picture of my brother running a marathon. And tell us about where you are, Eric, because your background's more exciting than mine.
New house. Just moved out. Finally, left my parents' house. It's about damn time.
Very sick, dude. And I mean, what I see right now, beautiful paintbrushes and mason jars and stuff.
And none of that's mine. All of that is all of that belongs to my very artistic partner. But right. I get to, I'm a cool artist when I do these podcasts.
Yeah, you look like the artiste. Just stealing your partner's thunder. I get it.
Exactly.
No, shouts out to Jesse, and again, congratulations to you guys. It's very exciting stuff, and it's a rad place. I saw it before there was furniture in it.
Ooh. Russ is an OG.
But you know what? We're just talking about backgrounds and how ours are different. You and I are working towards doing these podcasts IRL in the flesh. We've been teasing it, but I think it's gonna happen
very, very soon, sooner than the people would think.
And I'm excited about it. But not to belittle the pods that we've been doing over Zoom. There was a pandemic. We had to make sure everyone was safe. And for this guest that's on the podcast today, Zoom helped us out because they're all the way in the DC, Virginia area. So it would have been a trek for us to go over, would have been a trek for them to come over. But without the power of Zoom and other online capabilities, this episode was made possible where we got to talk to our old friend, Rob Cline of Nowadays and Pillowfort. We reminisce about music. Nowadays has helped our band Shark Club out in so many ways. Those of you who are fans know that we put a split out with them, went on a weekender or two with them, and it was very formative for our band. But we also get into their work in the political sphere, which, if that word politics triggers anybody, please keep listening, because I personally learned a lot, and I found it very interesting. There's no agenda in this episode. We're just giving you the cold hard facts, and I don't know what else to say. Eric, am I selling it okay?
Yeah, you're selling it okay. I think all that's left to do is roll the interview.
Here we are with our chat.
Roll it.
With
roll it.
With our old friend Rob Cline. Roll it.
Come down and see me. It's been more than 10 weeks. You pray to your deity that I won't be coming back. You can tell that you're mad. You still can't hear me. Riddles that I speak chase me down I Street. We're taking a few steps back.
How you doing?
So good. It's so good to see you. I'm glad we were able to set this up.
Great to see you all. It's been so long.
I know. How long has it been is the question.
Don't ask me anything about time and space. It has all been lost.
Well, you've been pretty busy with a bunch of stuff, which we're going to get into. But
Yeah.
The podcast has started, by the way. I want to, and I know you don't want to talk about like music stuff too much on here, but I just got to bring this anecdote up about the first time that we met, and I don't know if you remember that instance.
The first time, no, honestly, I can't remember what the first time was.
It's fine. I'm gonna tell it, and I'm gonna make you look like a golden god, and you're gonna.
Oh wow.
But this is what happened. Our band Shark Club. I think it was like our second or third show ever at this house in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, called the Chalk Zone. Ringing any bells yet?
Oh, you did play a Chalk Zone
We
gig.
played.
That was your first one, yeah.
Yeah. And it was we played in this person's living room, and it was called the Chalk Zone because the walls were like that kind of paint where you can draw chalk on it and then erase it. And so we played, and it was pretty good. And there was a couple other bands there who were really, really good. And then there were these group of like really cool kids in the crowd who were all in a band together, but like weren't on the bill. They just came to see the show, and everyone's like, "You guys got to play an impromptu set." And so and then you were like, "No, we don't have to." And they're like, "Do it, do it." And I remember the person next to me like, "Yo, you're gonna want to see this. Like, this band is freaking sick." And you didn't have any of your instruments, so you're just borrowing from the bands. I think you asked me for a guitar cable or instrument cable or a capo or something, and nowadays performs an incredible set, blew us away. We were like, oh, we will never be as good as them. And then I remember after your set, you were like, thank you for letting me borrow this. I was like, no, sir, thank you for christening my capo or guitar cable, whatever I gave you. This was so tight. And from that
I
instance,
remember now.
yeah, you remember now? From that instance, nowadays,
Yeah.
and just you guys in the band as people we looked up to as role models in the DIY space, and you kept in touch with us. You were like, hey, we're gonna play a couple show, like a weekend show. You want to come play with us? We're like, oh my god, it would be an honor. And then you said, we're gonna put a split out. Would you like to be on it? And we're like, oh my god, it would be an honor. So you helped kind of get us into that touring grind and that releasing music kind of grind. And I don't think you ever realized how much that meant to us as a band in the early stages. And I needed you to know
That's so sweet.
how much we appreciate, again, you as people, but also the band nowadays means a lot to us. So super stoked that you're able to join us.
For sure. I can't believe I forgot that was the first time, but yeah, I totally remember actually. Let's see, I remember, so first of all, just, to back it up, like Chalk Zone, that place in the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, which is the middle of nowhere, New Jersey, that was the only house venue where we grew up and went to high school and everything. And it was just a friend of ours who was a little bit older. Mm-hmm. And when he was in high school, there were a lot more bands around and there was a lot more of a scene, but he wanted to keep it going. He had a house, so he did. And it was actually a really beautiful space that lasted for a really long time. And I played with so many amazing bands there. And I'll also say that space, if that didn't exist nowadays, probably would have never been what it was, because that was our first kind of real show. And that was where, we were one of the only bands around, especially one of the only bands that were like younger and could bring in a newer crowd. And so we got booked a lot. And it allowed us to meet bands like you, who were coming through on tour. We met bands from everywhere from like Chicago to Atlanta to Boston. Yeah. And, that was our first time, meeting bands outside of our own town and like learning about this wider world of DIY. So Chalk Zone, we have a lot to thank there. But yeah, we're deciding, hey, like there's a Chalk Zone show, should we go? You want to go? We like to go support and everything. I forget who else was on the bill, but it was some other good bands. But we heard about Shark Club. We were like, oh, that's an interesting name. Like, let's check it out. We went on your Bandcamp, and I think we listened to Michigan or something. If that was out at that time, I think it was. And
I think so.
Yeah, and we were like, oh, like that place is known for booking a lot of hardcore and like heavy punk and like screamo, which I like. But we were like, oh, another band that like is kind of up our alley, kind of like the indie, kind of more pop punk-ish kind of vibe. So we're like, oh, let's go check it out. They sound good. And we all ended up actually going except our guitarist. But when everyone was like, hey, y'all should play a set, we like called him and like, you got to come down to Chalk Zone. Like they're saying we got to play a set. And yeah, that was a really fun time. And you know, that space, just as you can tell from the story, like tons of really supportive friends there and just people who made it a good community. So thank you for starting us off with that amazing memory that I almost certainly forgot about.
Well, I mean, I've got tons of memories, very fond ones, obviously, because again, you and the band have done so much for us, and again, more than any of y'all would probably realize. But and again, I don't know how much you want to talk about it. Are you still musical? Are you trying to find time to do all that, or are you kind of focused more on the career path?
I mean, definitely focus more on the career path. And as I'm sure you saw, like, you know, we have like before the pandemic, I was really transitioning to more just hosting shows as I was playing. We were still playing, and I was in a band called Pillowfort and another band called Curls. But nowadays, I kind of transitioned into Pillowfort, new members, new sound, kind of a new approach. But we never super got that off the ground. We never recorded music or anything. We were just kind of like a local band. We did do like one show in New Jersey or something. But yeah, I was way more focused on running space, which is a ton of work, especially in DC where there's not a lot of spaces and it's in really high demand. We were getting just tons of volume. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And then obviously the pandemic, like that wasn't an option anymore. And over time, you know, it just kind of, we already had a feeling before the pandemic that we were like very tired and it was really demanding, even though we were having a blast. And now I'm just kind of in a different situation. And yeah, like I still love music. Obviously, you can't see it, but this room is full of all my gear, including my prized possession, this Hello Kitty keyboard.
Beautiful.
But yeah, so I just turned it on by accident. we were still jamming. My partner and I, Caroline, live together, and we always we'll have little jam sessions, and our friend Tori will come over and make weird noises and stuff on a keyboard or something. So definitely still making music. We've seen kind of, you know, what we'll do when the whole kind of live music apparatus kicks back in. But yeah, definitely focusing on career stuff right now. But I always have to talk about nowadays, which wasn't that long ago, but feels like a million years ago at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's when we were like doing our thing kind of hardcore, like we were for a minute there. But yeah, I'll leave it to you.
Well, no, I mean, there's plenty of memories that we could talk about. We helped you with a music video, which was an honor and a lot of fun. You invited us to come and play in DC at one point. It wasn't at, I think, your venue, but it was at a venue nonetheless. And I think you were still going to school and you let us sleep on the floor of your dorm, which was very generous and also a very fond memory. Yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of just saying memories at you rather than asking you about them. Because I'm just such a fan. I feel like I'm talking to a superstar here. Because outside of music, you are working on some really, really important stuff. Do you want to kind of talk about what you've been getting into? Are you still attending school? Have you graduated yet?
Yeah, and let's get into that. But if you want to keep asking music stuff, you know, at the circle around or whatever, feel free.
We'll sprinkle it in.
yeah. There you go. Yeah, I'm still in school, which sucks. I'm a grad student right now.
Gotcha.
And I'm actually three classes away from graduating and getting my master's, which is going to feel great.
Yeah, congrats.
But, yeah, thank you. But I have been taking it super slow because of online school and because of my job. So I'm probably like 2 semesters away from graduating still, but we'll get it done. And so that degree is it's not in music or anything, it's in strategic communications, which is like what I do professionally. And yeah, right now, so actually for like the past 2, maybe 3 might be a stretch, but definitely for 2.5 years, I've been working in Virginia politics. So I live in DC, but Virginia is right across the river. And there's a lot more going on there, politically speaking, one of the reasons is because DC is not state, and so we don't get to elect people to represent us. We just have to suffer. But there's definitely a lot going on in Virginia, and that's where I got my first job out of school and just kind of kept going in Virginia politics. And you don't have to know anything about Virginia, I think, for this to be relatable, because like state and local politics is something, one, most people don't pay attention to, which is, I don't blame them, but two, is super duper important. And like there's actually so much that goes on at the state level and at the local level that impacts our lives like every single day. There's a lot to say about the intersection of like music and politics, and we can get to that as well. But right now, I work for a campaign in Virginia, working on a lieutenant governor campaign. For everyone out there who's like, what's a lieutenant governor? So every state has a governor, and then most states have also a lieutenant governor. They're like the vice president of a state. The difference is, instead of being elected, like when we elect the president, it's on a ticket, and their vice president is just like part of that ticket. Like when people voted for Biden, they were also voting for Kamala Harris to be vice president. Whereas in Virginia and a lot of states, you vote for those independently. And so we're running our own race, independent of the governor's race, to win the nomination for the Democratic Party and then go on to the general election. So I know that sounds really technical and boring, but it actually is super exciting. The guy I work for is named Sean Perryman. He is running for lieutenant governor, and he is super inspiring. And, we can talk about that a little bit, but the top line is basically he is I won't say lifelong, but for years he's been a racial justice organizer in Virginia. He was the president of the largest NAACP chapter in Virginia. He used to work for Representative Elijah Cummings as a congressional investigator, and he actually helped investigate the Trump administration. And he actually helped kick off some of the key pieces of evidence in the Trump Russia kind of investigation, which is really interesting. But he, at his core, is a racial justice organizer. He was super active kind of last summer when Black Lives Matter was hitting the streets. And he's kind of trying to take that to Richmond, which is the capital of Virginia. And I think there's a lot of interesting things to say about it. I think one is like, anyone who knows me and has talked politics with me knows that I'm like, super far left, crazy socialist person. But like Sean, he won't call himself that, but Sean is a really strong progressive who has taken stances on issues that mainstream politicians are too afraid to take. He stands up for really important issues and bold ideas, and is willing to take risks even on issues that might not be popular or politically expedient. He might have an easier time winning this election if he just like went the traditional path, but he doesn't, and I respect that, and that's why I'm with him and working for him. But yeah, I want to allow you to kind of ask questions and whatever you want to hear about kind of what we've been up to.
Well, politics for me has, don't get me wrong, I completely understand how crucial and important that is for our communities and just the way that our country is run. But it's always been an intimidating topic for me just because there's so much that goes into it. You have always kind of been, again, another person that I looked up to who kind of immerses themselves into that world. And, if someone brings up a topic of discussion, you have kind of the cold hard facts to back it up, which I really respect and admire. That being said, everything that you just explained, you were able to explain it kind of in layman's terms, again, for someone like me. And I appreciate that. What are you specifically doing on this campaign? Are you disclosed to even talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Sean's communications director, which is why I'm able to talk about things so casually.
Great, yeah.
Because, that's what they pay me to do. But no, I think like you're totally right. Like there are definitely people who are involved in politics, and you'll talk to them, and they'll say something, and you'll be like, I don't even know what you just said.
Yeah.
And I think that's obviously why some people are so intimidated And it's something we have to remind people every day on the campaign is like, what is an average person who might come across what we're putting out? Like, how does this strike them? Not just someone who, watches CNN or MSNBC all day and like understands exactly what's going on, or someone who's on Twitter like arguing about the finer points of legislation. Like, that's not normal people. And, I never blame people for that, because the truth is most people are busy and for a good reason, and they can't make politics such part of their life. And I think that's especially true when you talk about working class people, right? Like, if you're working 2, maybe even 3 jobs, like to pay the bills, I'm never going to blame you for not knowing something about politics. And I think that's something people who really care about politics often lose sight of. And we kind of turn to this attitude of like blaming regular people for not being in the know, or for falling for misinformation or whatever it might be. But I think it's really understandable to not be in the know. And that's kind of my job, is to be the bridge between those 2 worlds, so to speak, and connect people with understandable information and actionable information. So yeah, like what I do for Sean, what does it mean to be a communications director? It's you're probably thinking of traditional stuff. Like I get to talk to reporters for like newspapers and stuff, and tell them about our campaign and provide quotes and reactions to current events and that kind of thing. Press releases, like that kind of stuff, sending out quotes from Sean and others. But I also do fun stuff too. Like I run all of his social media accounts, which is, I love, that's my bread and butter, so to speak. Because I think social media is relatable. If you have to squeeze a complex idea into 280 characters, like that's an art in and of itself. We do other stuff as well. Like I maintain his website. I didn't design it, but I keep it up to date and everything. I do a lot of graphic design and video work. Actually, last night was the one and only televised debate, which was actually super fun, because you always see these like fancy debates on TV, like whoever it is, Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, or whoever it is, like in last year's Democratic debates, or it seems really exciting to be in the room where it happens. And even though it wasn't as high level as a presidential debate, it was still really cool to like go to the studio and
for sure.
Yeah, I was in the green room with the candidate. Green room is like a loose term because it wasn't that glamorous, but doing the makeup for him and running lines, and it's really exciting. And then sitting in the crowd and live tweeting the event, clipping videos as they happen and trying to post them. So that's there's a lot that I do, but that's pretty much the core of it, right? Is like anytime there's a message to get out about our campaign, or like a public facing way to connect with voters, it's my job to make sure that goes well and that we're kind of hitting all of the messages we want to hit.
Gotcha. So forgive me if this next question is a bit insensitive. I'm not sure what kind of mindset people are on when they're on the campaign trail, but this is either going to end and your candidate gets elected, or unfortunately he doesn't. What happens to your position in both cases? Do you just move on? Do you try to find the next campaign? If they are elected, do they maybe extend an invitation to work with them in office? How is that all going to work, do you think?
Yeah, that decision is usually an individual level decision, right? I've met people who are like chronic campaigners. That's what they do. Because I'll be honest, like I've worked for a campaign right now. I've also worked in a legislative office, like for someone who's already elected and was like doing their job. So I've kind of seen both worlds, and there's a lot of overlap, but there's also a lot that's different. And I'm learning every day on this campaign, right? So there are people who are like those chronic campaigners, and it's like win or lose, when the campaign's over, they go find another.
Gotcha.
And I think that's a really appealing lifestyle in some respects, because first of all, it's really hard to keep that going in one spot. Most of those people have to move around. And like, for example, the campaign manager on my campaign, he's a chronic campaigner for sure. He's lived in Montana, Wisconsin, Arkansas, Virginia, you name it. He's been able to live in all these places and have new experiences. And I think that's really cool. But for some people that's really intimidating. They're like, I don't want uproot and leave my home every 9 months, a year, however long you're on the campaign. So some people, if your candidate wins and they take office, there are definitely a lot of people who will go with you and kind of become your staff. And that's really common. Like, for example, like Joe Biden, who is obviously the president, like when he won, he took a bunch of his campaign staff into office with him. Trump did the same thing. Obama, like going all the way back to every president pretty much ever. Like that's super common. If you lose, then it becomes your choice of like, do I want to find another campaign, or do I want to just try to do something completely different? In my case, I will probably try to do something completely different, because campaign life is fun, but it's demanding in a lot of senses. Like my partner works at a nonprofit, and so our work day looks really different. Like my boss can call or text me at like 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and especially because I do communications, it's like if something's happening, it's happening now. It's very 24/7, fast paced. The cool part of that is like sometimes in the middle of the day, I can just kind of like have a break and like not be on that 9 to 5 grind. I can like run errands or whatever, because I know like, well, 8 o'clock tonight, I'm going to be working. So that's definitely, it's a little more flexible in that way, but it's also demanding in that way. And so there's a lot that goes into that, right? It's like, you're not going to have like a steady office culture where you come into work every day at 9, have a human resources department, there's the kitchen with snacks in it. Like that's like not the office life of the campaign, like especially obviously right now, but where we're working virtually. But even when you're not, a lot of working virtually on campaigns is like really common even before the pandemic. So that's definitely a huge difference. But yeah, I think for me, like I would love to get into some sort of like definitely staying in the political realm, but I'd love to get into organizing, whether that's in like the labor movement, like working for a union, or working for like a nonprofit who works on an issue I really care about, or some sort of grassroots advocacy group, like a national level one. Those are all kind of things you can do. And then since I live in DC, there's like tons of jobs here, obviously, you can go work at the EPA, or go work on Capitol Hill for like a senator or congressperson or whatever it is. And the cool thing about communications is, like, no matter what, everyone needs communications staff. And that applies for businesses as well. It's like everyone needs to have a Twitter and an Instagram and a Facebook, in my opinion, and a website, and some sort of relationship with the press. And, these are things that just like a successful modern office needs. And so there's definitely, for communications folks, there's a lot of opportunities out there. And it's weird to think about, but if you think about like any part of our government, like all of them have communication staff. Like the Department of Agriculture has someone who runs their Twitter page. You know what I mean? Like it may be boring and they might tweet about wheat, but like they exist. So long-winded way.
Have a good wheat tweet.
Yeah. Or corn or whatever it is. The Department of, you could go down the list of mundane activities, but everyone needs communications. So there's a little bit of job security there. That question though it definitely hits home, because election day is in a week and a half.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Well, good luck to you and everyone else working on your campaign.
Thank you.
You kind of spoke to this already, but I was curious, like what the dream job at this point for you would be. Do you see or hope to see yourself on some sort of presidential campaign? Maybe you're still trying to figure out what pocket of politics you fit into best. Do you yourself possibly see you running for some type of office? I don't know. What's your answer to that question?
I'm like 90% sure I've never run for office, mostly because I work really closely with people who do, and I kind of see what their life is like.
Gotcha.
And you obviously lose a certain level of privacy and a certain level of free time, and people are mean to you on the internet more than they should be, and all that stuff. So there's that. I also think I might not be like the best at just being patient with people sometimes. politicians have to be really patient. And, you know, I'm sure y'all have seen it maybe at a gig or when I was just talking politics with someone on tour. Like, if someone says something I disagree with, I'm going to say it. And I'm, like you said, I'm going to give them the cold hard facts. And the politician, you know, you gotta smooth it over a little bit more than that, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have a dream job. I think I'm very mission oriented, obviously. Like, I'm not working for Sean because I care about who, well, I do care who the next lieutenant governor of Virginia is, but it's like, I more care about the fact that Sean is aligned with me on the things I care about. And so, like, my dream job is just to work somewhere where I believe in the mission in like a really hardcore way. And I would have no problem just throwing myself into the work. Like, I can think of a few organizations, I won't name them, but like I said, like working in the labor movement, for example, would be awesome. Like, I'd love to kind of work at a large union or help people unionize in the workplace. And, you know, and fight for all those things like a living wage and better conditions and benefits. I'd also love to work like, you know, for some sort of explicitly like socialist organization who are like working to kind of build like a mass movement for socialism, kind of like the Democratic Socialists or Sunrise Movement, even though they don't call themselves socialists, like they totally are. Like there are folks out there, but you know, as for presidential politics, I think for a lot of people that is kind of like the highest up or like the fanciest thing you can think. Is like, if you ask someone like what's the highest level of communications position in politics, you know, that's like White House press secretary, right? Like that, like West Wing style. I stand behind the podium and all the reporters are shouting questions at me and I'm pointing at them and answering. And I think that could be cool. But like I said, it would have to be for someone who I really just at the bottom of my heart like believe in and could feel completely kind of free of conscience supporting and putting my heart into it.
I'm curious what got you into politics growing up. Like, how long was that kind of the career path you wanted to take? When did it over when did you prioritize that over becoming like a famous rock star? Like, what was that path for you?
Well, it's interesting because when I was like a junior in high school, I was kind of split between like two things to study. And that the first was music, but not like pure music. Like I was interested in like music engineering or like music business, like something a little more on the applied side than on the, like the pure performance. Because my thing is like, and I think y'all know this from nowadays, like I'm not, and I will never claim to be like some amazing musician. I look at it more kind of like a holistic thing of like, how can I create a great performance and like, how can we create a great vibe or a feeling or, you know, maybe I might not be able to like rip a guitar solo the way some people can, but like I kind of see kind of different angles, I guess. And so like, I was really into the idea of maybe doing like sound engineering or music management or business or something. The other thing I was interested in was computer science. And I was really close to going to school for computer science. I did some like coding stuff in high school and I was really into it. But that was another thing where I realized like, you know, I like this and I'm good at it. But there's like a billion people out there who are like way better at this than me. And I found myself running into places where I was like, maybe I'm just like not smart enough in this way to like actually be a computer scientist. Like this is actually super hard. But yeah, I actually like even through senior year of high school, I was applying to schools as a comp sci major. And at the same time, I was really involved in mock trial at my school, which is like, you know, you kind of be a lawyer and you like try a case with like all the evidence in the courtroom and stuff. And I noticed that I was really good at public speaking and communicating, and obviously was starting to get really involved in politics around the time. 2015, I got involved in the Bernie Sanders, his first presidential campaign, volunteering. And yeah, I was looking at GW where I went to undergrad, and they had a major called political communications, and I was like, actually, that seems really cool because I always liked politics, but I kind of saw studying political science as like a bad idea. So it's like, what do you do with that? But political communications like sounded a lot more my style. But I would say that's like the real answer to like why I got involved in politics is a lot more nebulous. Like I don't know where it started, but I've always been the person to be extremely pissed off about injustice, sometimes to a fault. I've always been someone who likes the debate to a fault. And I think really the two things, like people often say, like, what radicalized you, or like, you know, what brought you to like your like kind of positions, is like the healthcare system in America was definitely a big piece of that for me. It's just like we have a system where if you don't have enough money, you have to make a choice between either going broke or sometimes literally dying and leaving your family with that money that you saved. And, you know, I have family members who have been in that situation. My family is not lower class. We're not rich either. And we've had plenty of situations where we had to make a decision to skip medical care just because it didn't make sense financially. And then you look at other countries right over the border in Canada, but also, you know, throughout Europe and throughout Asia and some African countries, South America, pretty much every place but here, if you need to go to a hospital or a doctor, you just do it. And that is your right as a taxpayer. The same way you get to go to school, or the same way you get to drive on a road, the same way you get to go to the library. And I kind of came to the conception that millions of other people have, is that like, there's so many things in this country that we have corporatized and monetized that should just be for the public benefit. And it would actually be cheaper to be, it would make more sense financially to be for the public benefit too. And so, yeah, like I didn't know then like what socialism was or like anything about policy. I just knew that it was wrong. And I was like, this is really stupid. And that definitely, like, when I heard Bernie Sanders talking about it, I was like, you know, this guy's making a point that I've been thinking about for a while. I'm going to volunteer for his campaign. And that kind of like threw me into that world. And then I started learning more about, you know, the political process itself, you know, how we make legislation, how policy impacts people's lives, how people get elected, and how you win an election. So yeah, and you know, it's not just healthcare too. I mean, it's affordable housing, it's childcare, it's all these things in life that, like, you know, we don't have because we live in America. Another part of that is, you know, I'm from Atlantic City area in New Jersey, and we've seen kind of what happens when people who are well off like take advantage of those who aren't. The workforce in Atlantic City, which obviously is known for like its tourism industry, there's tons of casinos and hotels and restaurants and beaches. And the folks who staff those places are my neighbors and the people who I grew up with, and people who work there as the waiters and the hotel maids and the, you know, bartenders, whatever it might be. Those folks are not only just getting by, but most of them are, you know, Black or Latino or Asian. They're, you know, disproportionately women, right? It's people who are already kind of exploited in our society. And meanwhile, the people who own these casinos are literally people like Donald Trump. Like, he was a household name a decade before he ever ran for president where I grew up, because, you know, he owned the hotel and he was always fighting with his employees. And we've seen kind of what happens when folks are trampled on. And there was a union when I was in high school who went on strike in Atlantic City because the billionaire investor who was, you know, taking over decided he was going to renegotiate their contract and take away their healthcare benefits. And I actually had a teacher who I was really close with, and her husband was an organizer with that union. And so I actually was able to go to some of those strikes, and I went to a rally with them, and I kind of learned about the labor movement. And that was definitely really formative for me because, you know, I already knew about all the problems we had, right? But that was the time when I realized how you fight back, which is collective action, which is when regular people who individually have no power join together and create an unstoppable force, right? Like, that's what politics is about for me. is, together we're weak, or individually we're weak, together we're strong. Like that is kind of the idea of the labor movement, and that really animates me politically.
Yeah, my next question here was going to be, what would your answer be to, or response be to people who say the only people who can enact change are in office?
Yeah, I think, I think what I just said is true, but I think there's a lot more to say about that, right? It's like, everyone has their own theory of change, which is like, how do you actually like upset the status quo and like change what's going on? I think it's really, I'll never blame people for feeling powerless or for feeling like, there's not really much we can do. And this question that you asked, like, has been debated for hundreds, if not thousands of years. There's never really like one true answer. But I think the closest thing they've gotten to an answer is what I said, is collective power, right? And it's like, I fundamentally am, like, I identify as a Marxist, which means like in an academic sense, like the theories and things that Karl Marx wrote about, like, are kind of the foundation of my thinking. And, he wasn't the first to ever talk about this, but this is like a foundation of Marxism. It's like, basically, the economy and our government are kind of ruled by the same people. And when we look at how you make change, and I think it's important to keep it contemporary, right? Like, we're not talking about all of human history. Like, let's just talk about right now, or like the last few decades. Like, how do you make change in America? Well, start by thinking about, has anything happened that like is objectively good? And sometimes it can be really easy to like not find anything, because everything seems so bleak sometimes. But there are things that are objectively good that have happened in recent American history. I think one of the most important things, obviously, is the civil rights movement. A generation or two ago, Black people couldn't vote. They couldn't, obviously, we all know the stories, like, couldn't eat at the same restaurants or same hotel rooms, ride in the front of the bus, like, million examples, right? And it's not just those like symbolic things, it's also these really insidious structural things, like couldn't get a loan to buy a house, or like couldn't find housing in a good neighborhood with good schools, or couldn't send their child to a school that was well funded, or these things that actually have an impact on your life, like for decades and decades, right? Like, if you can't send your child to a good school and they don't get the education they deserve, then they're going to grow up without the means to succeed. And then they're going to have children, and those children are going to be in the same, if not worse, of a situation. So like, right, like the civil rights movement was more than just the kind of like sitting at the same lunch counter. It was about kind of this entire idea of like racial segregation in society. And a lot of, there are a lot of those things that still existed to this day, right? But there were a lot of wins of the civil rights movement. Voting Rights Act being the biggest one, probably, right? Like, so when we think about how that happened, like, a lot of people don't even know, like, couldn't tell you who the president was that signed the Voting Rights Act into law. They can tell you that like Martin Luther King was the leader of the movement, or like maybe they know about Malcolm X, right? Or maybe they even know about like John Lewis or some of these other people. But the reality is that the civil rights movement was millions and millions of people coming together and creating change from the bottom up. And working in politics, I've seen it happen on a smaller scale a million times. People in power, they have their own set of kind of incentives and things that push them to action. And creating change is all about figuring out where those pressure points are and applying pressure. And you're never gonna be able to do it alone, right? Like, the civil rights movement worked because they found the people they needed to find. They said, okay, we have X amount of people in power who kind of need to be sent a message. And they were able to create a mass movement, like an actual mass movement, like millions of people who were marching and who were fighting and who were, not just kind of the stuff you see on TV, but they were also writing their Congress people. They were boycotting businesses who weren't on board, and kind of this just like the full scale assault of like the parts of society that were holding them back. And it's like, that's really hard to do, but that is what you need to do to make change. And if we think about last summer, after the murder of George Floyd, which was a year ago, yesterday, actually. It might be easy to say, well, not much has changed in the last year. And I think that's a separate conversation. But I think there's no doubt that there was a mass movement last year that left a mark on American society. I think it completely changed public opinion for the better. That was because it wasn't just a small group of people trying to go to their congressman and talk about the issue. People were literally getting in the streets, and it extended beyond that, right? People were making corporations be accountable. They were going to their local leaders, right? Their mayors and their city council members or their state legislators, and kind of creating change where it was possible, whenever it was possible. And that really is how you get things done. Is you have to create a movement. You have to create a mass movement of people of all kinds, right? You can't, if it's an exclusionary movement, it's never going to succeed. It has to be inclusionary. And on top of that, you have to start at the bottom. You have to engage locally before you can engage nationally. And I think that's another thing people often kind of not misunderstand, but I think miss about politics is you're not gonna get Joe Biden's ear about an issue. And even if you get 1 million people to tweet about it on Twitter, you might not get his ear. You have to start locally and build out and up as well throughout the system, because what we're really talking about is a political system that is so intertwined in our society and our economy and kind of the entire way we live, and you have to attack it from all angles. So long-winded answer, but it's a big question.
It was an inspiring answer from you. Thank you for that. And I should also note, I didn't give you any of these questions I was going to ask beforehand, because we kind of just like to have a conversation here. And you've given such extremely well-spoken answers. I really commend you for that.
Thank you.
Before we get into our final segment here, were there any other interview questions you expected us to ask, or things that you wanted to talk about that we didn't get to?
That's a good question. I mean, not really. I think, I'd love to talk a little bit more specifically about what the campaign I'm working on is all about. Obviously, I what I do, but there's some really interesting issues, I think, at play.
If you'd like to talk about that, please, the floor is yours.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, this might be a little bit of a crash course in Virginia politics, but at the same time, I think it's completely applicable to anywhere really in America. And I will say, I know talking politics isn't your jam, and so just for your viewers, I'll say everything I'm about to say is all me. It's not y'all. I'm going to get into some hard truths, as we say, about party politics and everything. And so this is me. But Virginia for a really long time has been a conservative state. 150 years ago was the capital of the Confederacy. Until last year, there were statues of Robert E. Lee everywhere. Traditionally conservative. But Virginia also has been changing a lot. Just like a state like Georgia has been changing, or Texas, and kind of trending towards a more kind of liberal mentality as young people have moved there and the states become more diverse, and et cetera, et cetera. And so actually Democrats had never really had full control of the state government, which is the state legislature and the governorship, for a really long time. The last time they had full control, Democrats were the party of segregation. So that was a really long time ago. And they won full control 2 years ago in 2019. I worked on a campaign that made that happen. And basically what we've seen over the past 2 years is that just because Democrats were in charge, it didn't really mean that we were necessarily going to have some sort of revolutionary change in what's happening. Virginia, for example, Virginia was ranked by experts as the worst state in the entire country for workers' rights. That same year, CNBC, which is a very popular business news channel, ranked Virginia the best state for business. So #1 state in the country for businesses, last state in the entire country for workers. And that basically shows you what the economy is like there. Is basically everything's great if you're doing well, you own a business, work at you're at the top of a corporation, you're a CEO, you're an investor. But if you're just an average person who has a blue collar job, or maybe you work in like a low wage white collar job, whatever it is, like you're pretty much getting screwed over. Until a few weeks ago, the minimum wage in Virginia was still $7.25, which is the federal minimum wage as well. But a lot of states have since raised it. And it's like, y'all, I assume still live in New Jersey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the minimum wage there is like maybe $12 now or something. And so, a few weeks ago, literally until a few weeks ago, the minimum wage in Virginia was still $7.25.
Wow.
The housing crisis in Virginia is horrific. 5 of the top 10 cities in Virginia or 5 of the top 10 cities in the whole country for eviction rates are in Virginia. Virginia is definitively the worst state for evicting poor people from their homes. So, and I could go on with all these statistics, but the status quo is definitely not working for regular people. And so something we really talk about a lot in this campaign is kind of strengthening workers' rights and changing that ranking. And something I want to inform your viewers about, because it means a lot to me, and I think there's actually a good kind of segue here into kind of what we've been talking about. Virginia is what's known as a right to work state. It's right to work is a misnamed policy that was invented by Republicans, conservatives. The idea of right to work is basically, if your workplace unionizes, you're basically allowed to opt out of it and enjoy all the benefits of the union without actually paying into it or being part of it. And so if your union negotiates healthcare benefits for you from your employer, you get those benefits. But you don't have to actually pay your union dues, which literally enable your union to make those negotiations on your behalf, right? So I know that sounds a little complex, but basically think of it as the person in your group project who got the A but didn't do any of the work. That's what it is, right?
Gotcha.
And it hurts the labor movement because it makes it harder for people to unionize, because you can't unionize if no one's paying their union dues. You can't have a union if you don't pay someone to negotiate on your behalf. That's how unions work. And so Virginia is one of the worst states for unions in the whole country. And it's because of this law. And we're not the only state with it. There are a lot of other states that still have it on the books. And the Democrats, despite being the union-friendly party, have been unwilling to repeal this law because they don't want to upset big businesses like Amazon, who have recently come to Virginia and set up shop. Because they know they'll pull out, or they'll threaten to pull out, right? And so they really only care about appeasing big businesses. And Sean is the staunchest advocate for repealing the right to work in this entire race, perhaps in all of Virginia. And it's one of the reasons I love him and am working for him. And repealing the right to work is imperative. And the connection here is basically there's national legislation that is going through Congress right now called the PRO Act. And if I leave your viewers with any idea, it's the PRO Act. We need to pass this thing. It is the most transformational labor legislation that would have been passed in 100 years or so, since basically unions were legalized. This legislation, it's really interesting. Joe Biden supports it. Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in the House support it and have already passed it. And there are 3 Democratic senators who, there's 50 Democratic senators, only 3 of them don't support it. And if those 3 did support it, it would almost certainly pass. And it would repeal right to work in every state that still has it, among tons of other really good things for our economy. And Virginia is one of those, like I said, there's 3 senators who oppose it. One of those senators is a senator in Virginia. So it comes full circle. But if your viewers want to be part of the change, I would definitely encourage them to just Google it, the PRO Act, right? How can I get involved? Because this is, who knows what's going to happen in the next election. Maybe the Democrats lose control of Congress. Maybe in 3 years, Joe Biden loses to a Republican. Maybe Trump runs again, who wins. Who knows what could happen? it's really important that we do this right here, right now, and it would definitely change America for the better. So that is my 2 cents question right there.
Well, I appreciate that. And again, you mentioned before you started talking, no one's pushing an agenda on anybody, but I think it's definitely important for people to be aware of the issues, not only in the state of Virginia, but also across the country. So definitely thank you for that. And of course, I thank you for taking the time to talk with us tonight. If you got a couple more minutes, we like to play a game with our guests.
Totally.
We play a game of this or that. Do you know how to play?
Maybe you should tell me that.
Take a guess. Take a guess of what this or that is about.
You're gonna show me 2 things, and I have to like pick one that I prefer. Maybe.
Whoa, Eric.
Must have played before.
Yeah, I must have played before.
All right, Eric, do you have one for Rob, or should I go off my list here?
You go first.
All right, Rob. Coffee or tea?
Definitely tea.
That was really quick. Do you
I
drink
explain?
coffee at all? Yeah, please explain.
Not to be TMI, but like caffeine is not good for me medically speaking, so I tend to stay away from coffee. Also, I just like don't need caffeine to like be alive. I just shower in the morning, then I'm awake. That's my coffee. But I will say I love the flavor of coffee. Like I drink, when I do have coffee, I drink it black, like nothing in it. But casually speaking, definitely gonna go with tea just because it's safer.
What's your go-to tea?
I went to herbal or fruity.
Herbal. Although I think fruity tea is good, but I love herbal tea with just a little bit of honey. I love tea with ginger. Ginger tea is great. Whenever I'm sick, that's like where I go.
What's your answer, Eric? Are you a coffee or tea guy?
I like tea more, but I drink both. Especially at work. I have a cup of coffee in the morning. I try to limit myself to just 1 cup a day because I didn't drink any coffee before I started this job, but now I have to be like up early in the morning all the time. So I don't want to like go too crazy with the caffeine. But I love a good herbal tea.
There you go. If I drink a full cup of coffee, like I'm bouncing off the walls and like having a breakdown. So I like when I do get coffee, I go to Wawa and I get like the smallest cup they have. And then I don't even fill it up all the way. I'll do 3/4 coffee and 1/4 hot chocolate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that like a mocha?
Maybe, not sure.
Well, so I drink neither. I drink neither coffee or tea. And when I was in college, I had a professor who liked to meet for coffee. And I always made it a point to get there like 10 minutes early so I could order a hot chocolate, but like play it off like it was coffee. And it worked every single time, Dr.
I
Dell.
didn't suspect a thing.
Yeah, there you
go. Do you want me to ask another one, Eric?
Yeah.
It's all good. Hey, Rob.
Thank you.
Rob, jazz or blues?
Ooh, that's tough. I'm gonna have to go blues. Jazz is objectively like more like talented of a genre, I think. Blues, I don't know. I've always loved blues. My dad is a huge blues guy. And I was definitely raised on it. And I love kind of, sometimes blues has a certain simplicity that I enjoy. Kind of anyone can jump in and just jam along. Whereas, not all jazz is organized. Obviously, there's like free jazz and stuff like that. But like jazz sometimes is like highly organized and a lot of attention to detail. And sometimes I like that blues. Blues is a little more of a bad boy, like I like that about blues. And there's blues, I think, tells a better story sometimes too. Like there's nothing beats like someone like, you can't really like sit around a fire with an acoustic guitar and like tell a story about when you were young, like to a jazz song the same way you can to a good blues tune. So
do you think blues and emo are like on the same line of evolution?
I think the new kind of blues jam is like tuning your guitar to an open key and just like hitting random strings, like,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
That's
Like
what I do.
You do the American football tuning. and you literally just like avoid a few frets, but other than that, you're golden. You just go for it. Like that's the new blues, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Eric, if you had to pick jazz or blues, I'm curious of your take.
Blues.
Wow. I think I would say jazz. I think jazz is pretty sick. Like you said, you have to be so smart and aware, because a lot of it is just like improvisational, being on the same page with everybody. Respect it. We'll do one more and we'll let you go, Rob. New England or OG England?
That's a good one. Oh
Thank you.
man. I could go so many ways with this answer. I'm gonna say New England. Has nothing to do with like American pride. I'm sure England is. I've never been to England. I'm sure it's awesome. I've heard great things. But my whole family lives in New England, from New England, grew up and went to school in New England. They got that. I think the New England accent beats a British accent.
Wow.
I also think, it's like, okay, if you were like gonna go to a bar or like a party with someone, and someone was like, would you go with this guy from Boston, or would you go with like this chap from London? Like, I'm probably gonna pick the guy from Boston because he's gonna outdrink me and like make me look good and like just kind of be the life of the party. I mean, there's so much else I could say here. Like, New England has Matt Damon, England has more of a history that's a little more controversial than New England, I think, right? Like colonizing the entire world and stealing everything from everyone. Whereas New England's probably done bad things, but just hasn't had as much time to do bad things as England has. So, but I have more to say on the subject. Maybe that's for next time.
Yeah, for next time, which I definitely hope happens, because again, we only hit the tip of the iceberg on everything here, Rob, but I genuinely, I know how busy you are. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with us. I hope you got enough out of it as much as I know I did. And hopefully, Eric, what are you thinking about over there, Eric, with your Skyrim map?
You'll never know. Hey, Rob.
Well, it was a pleasure.
You got any advice for, sorry, what was that?
Well, I was just saying it's a pleasure to see you all again after so long.
Absolutely. And I hope
to see you too.
I hope when stuff clears up, not only schedule wise, but also just, hectic world wise, we can meet up for just a genuine hang.
Absolutely. Eric was asking me a question.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask if you had any advice for someone wanting to get into politics, but if we're already ending, it's okay.
I have a really short answer that I think is a good place to end here. Get involved. I already said get involved locally. Find a local organization if you have the money for this, obviously. And usually it's very cheap. Find a local organization where you have to pay to be a member, because that that dollar or whatever, how much, you're basically saying, I'm definitely going to do this, or I wasted my money. But also membership organizations versus kind of like these like loosely affiliated organizations tend to just be like a much better way. Like, I won't tell you which ones, although I will say join DSA. It's the best one. But like really like find a local organization in your community that's doing work you care about, join and pay your dues. That's the number one way.
That's a great question, Eric, and another great answer from Rob. Again, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll keep in touch. We'll talk soon, all right?
Absolutely.
Hey, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that wonderful interview. That was definitely a good one, and I really miss Rob so much.
Me too, and the rest of the Pillowfort gang. Everyone's super cool. We should get like Danny and other folks on the pod. That would be a lot of fun.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, like Eric said, thank you so much to Rob. Good luck to them and all of their future endeavors. Super well-spoken, very informed. No matter what they're going to do, I know they're going to be successful, and just proud to know them and call them a friend. We'll leave you with a nowadays tune, a little song called Bird Up, which, fun fact, I got to direct the music video, and Eric was in it and my friend Jake was in it, and it was really cool. So go check that out if you haven't checked it out. And thank you so much for listening as always. Any last words here, Eric, before our guests leave the town of sound?
Bird up.
Bird up, word up, snail down. Come back real soon, y'all.